Hi everyone, welcome to my channel. My name is Cleo. Today we shall have a look at this motherboard coming from ASUS, known as the TUF Gaming B650M plus Wi-Fi. Before I begin, I'd like to thank ASUS Singapore to have provided this board for me to share with you. Let's begin. In this box, you will be ushered with a set of Wi-Fi antenna, the main motherboard itself, you'll be given a set of SATA cables. One is straight, one is right angle. Some M.2 standoffs and screws. These are rubber studs, which I believe is meant for your M.2, whereby you place this stud on the M.2 location of the motherboard. The cert itself, the manual, the CD-ROM, which I don't think we will use. The layout of the motherboard itself, useful. And stickers for you to tape your CMOS batteries or maybe on your case itself. This is how the motherboard look like. It's all matte black with some wordings that are dark yellow over here. And on the DIMM slot itself, they have deliberately done this kind of black and gray, telling you that if you're using dual channel RAM sticks, right, you should follow against the color over here. Nice touch. Now the measurement of this motherboard itself, since it's a square, from here to here is 243 millimeters. From here to here is 243 millimeters. Now looking at the height, or should I say you guys are interested about the clearance of the side VRM and the rear VRM areas, right? Now measuring, starting from the rear itself, measuring from the motherboard beneath all the way to the top of this I/O shroud, it's 45 millimeter in height. And for the side VRM heatsink itself, measuring from the motherboard bottom to the top of this VRM heatsink itself is 35 millimeter tall. The rear I/O over here, this whole block is made of plastic, then followed by the VRMs, be it the rear or the side. These are all aluminium, and it has a power stage of 12 plus 2 and able to deliver at 60 ampere. This is the 17-1800 socket. 4 DDR5 DIMM slots over here. Kindly do not put DDR4, it will not work. And it does support dual channel with a max capacity of 128 gigabytes and at a clock speed of 6400. And they do support Expo and XMP profile. At the bottom section here, there are 3 Amour shields which are made of aluminium. They are meant to cool down your B560 chipset, which you can see over here, and a 2 M.2 SSD. Starting off with the top M.2, this is a PCI-E 5.0, which is controlled by your processor. And at the bottom is PCI-E 4.0, which is controlled by your B650 chipset. Now, both of these M.2 are backward compatible. At the top over here, it allows you to plug in a Gen 5, Gen 4 or Gen 3 M.2. Else for the bottom, you are only allowed to connect Gen 3 or Gen 4. When I remove both the Amour shield for the M.2 itself, as you can see, the screws are captive so that you will not lose any screws. Same goes to the bottom. And of course, these are the thermal pads for your M.2. Now something which I like is the locking mechanism where you place the M.2, right. All you need to do is just swivel this locking mechanism and you will place the M.2 in place. Same goes to the bottom. Next are the PCIe slot where you have the top and the bottom. Both are at PCIe 4.0. Starting from the top, this is being controlled by your processor and it's being enforced with this metal bracket. So when you plug your GPU itself, it has the strength to hold your GPU. And this is running X16. Else for the bottom is being controlled by your B650 chipset, and this is running at X4. As for the connectivity on the board itself, let's start off with this 4-pin PWM fan header. This is meant for you to connect your rear fan to this header, and is located at a very good position. I like this very much. Reason being, right, you have shorter length to connect to the fan header instead of routing all over the shop on your motherboard itself. Next, on the lower left itself, this is meant for your front I/O audio. followed by a Thunderbolt port, 2 additional 4-pin PWM fan headers, whereby if you daisy chain your bottom fans, right, you can connect it directly over here. Then this is a debug COM port, whereby you have a device to connect to this while you're testing the motherboard and processor and such. You can have the error code on that device to do troubleshooting. This is a COM port. Next will be 2 USB 2.0 connectors, followed by a SATA connector. These are meant for your RGB connectors. On the left, this is a 4-pin 12V RGB, and on the right, this is commonly used, which is the 5V 3-pin ARGB. And next, these are all the front I/O connectors, whereby you connect your power switch, your reset switch, your HDD activity LED, and the power LED on this area over here. Right above it, this is the clear CMOS pin, whereby you short and you will reset all your configuration on your motherboard itself. Followed by 3 right angle SATA ports. Next will be the Type-C connector and the USB 3.2 generation 1 connector and a 24-pin connector, where you draw power from your PSU and to connect over here to supply all the power over at this section over here. Next will be 4 LED postcode, whereby if there is errors on your processor, your RAMs, or your GPU, it will light up, so that you will need to troubleshoot. Now, from the top itself, you have 2 more ARGB connector, which is 5V. Then all these are your PWM fan headers. Now, I'll start off from the bottom. This is a CPU op, followed by CPU fan. Then this is meant for your pump. And on my right, there are 2 EPS connector. One is 8-pin, one is 4-pin. At the rear, you have a DisplayPort, a HDMI port. These are meant for the integrated graphic card that is built in your processor. You'll be given total of 8 USB connection. You have total of 7 Type A and 1 Type C. Now, these black ones are version 2.0, and you have a dedicated port for you to do your BIOS flashback. The green ones over here and the blue one over here, they are version 3, and for the green ones is in fact generation 2, whereby you have a transfer speed of 10 gigabytes per second. Else for the blue ones is generation 1, which has a transfer speed of 5 gigabytes per second. And last but not least, the Type C, which is generation 2, which is 2 times 2. This is having a transfer speed of 20 gigabytes per second. At the top, this is the Ethernet connector, whereby you connect your physical LAN cable to this, and it has a transfer speed of 2.5 gigahertz. Over here, you have the Wi-Fi 6 antenna, and this Wi-Fi adapter itself, right, has a built-in Bluetooth. Over this section over here, this is all the audio connection, and it's 7.1 channel, whereby you can connect your microphone in, your speaker, your line in. Then this is your rail and a subwoofer. And this over here is the flashback BIOS button. For the EPS connector, you don't have to plug both. All is needed is just the 8-pin EPS connector, whereby you supply the power to your VRMs and to do the conversion to provide power to your processor. Unless you're doing extreme overclocking like the liquid nitrogen kind of overclocking, then probably you might need to plug the additional 4-pin. So take note on this. Speaking of which, right, something I would like to highlight on the fan headers itself, there are a total of 6, which is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. All these fan headers, right, they are rated 1 ampere. So if you do daisy chain on your fans itself, please take note on the amperage. Now, if this is not 0. Okay, for this, right, 0.38 ampere, you can connect up to 3, and to connect to 1 header. I mean, one of the fan headers, either of each. Now, you might be saying that, oh, I plus 3, which is exceeding 1 ampere. Not to worry, because on live stream, as what JJ on ASUS had mentioned, right, one of these headers, each, in fact, is catered for 1.25 ampere. But I would say that, based on safe gauge, take it as 1 ampere to each fan headers, so that you will not overload the headers itself. So imagine that if this is 0.5, and if you daisy chain 3 together, which is 1.5, you're going to overload your fan headers, and resulting in melting the headers or melting your connectors. So take note on this. This is how the UEFI looks like at the easy dashboard, where you can see all the stats over here. See the vcall, the temperature of the motherboard and such, and these are the fans readings. And of course you can set the fans using the mouse, right? You just pull up the curve that you wanted, like for example, let's say at 30 degrees, how much percentage you want the fan to ramp up, and you can set it individually as all the pump indications over here, the fans indication over here. Then you can also set this, which is the PBO2. This is auto, and of course you can set it manually, which I'm going to show you later. So this is the clean interface of showing you all the physical parts that you have fixed into this system itself, or should I say the motherboard itself. Next, if you to press F7, bring you to the advanced mode, where you have more things to see. First off, at the main, you can change the languages. See, different languages. Then security is whereby you want to lock your UEFI, as in like you don't want anybody to access to your UEFI. You can set a password, administrator password. Or auxiliary, if you have a brother or sister that require to log into your UEFI, right, you can give them a separate password, which is the user password, for them to log into this interface. Now coming to the AI tweaker, this is whereby you set your XMP profile. For my RAMs, is not XMP, is Expo, so this will be setted, pulling the profile in, and you can configure all this over here. CPU core ratio, in fact, this mainly to set your vcall and to set a certain fixed gigahertz for your processor to run. Let's say you want it to run at 4.5 gigahertz, so at all time, right, you will run at 4.5. You will not do any boost or such. Then the RAM timing, DRAM timing, where you tighten all the timings over here. Precision boost overdrive, this is actually the old version, so I wouldn't use this. And coming to the DG Plus VRM, this is whereby you set the load line calibration and whatever percentage that you give it. Performance BIOS, I wouldn't know what this is. I'll just leave it. Then tweaker's paradise, whereby you set the vcall, you can set it offset to negative value and followed by your voltages. Let's say for example 1.25 millivolt, something like that. Then you can set the SoC voltages on your motherboard VRMs, and the rest of the settings you can just go through. Memory voltage, you can also set your memory voltage. Some running higher clock speed and they want to overclock more than 6000, probably you want to run at 6400 or something more, so you got to pump the voltage over here. Now next, on advanced itself, I'm not going to go through every single one of them, just showing you briefly. So based on the fact CPU configuration, it just tells you that all these are supported, you can fiddle with it. Then for PCI system settings, this is whereby you enable your the resize bar on your GPU. USB configuration, these are all on enable. If you don't want to use any USB supportive stuff like the legacy USB support, right, you can disable them, not a problem. Network stack configuration is just to show you that you can enable it, be it whether IPv4 or IPv6. But normally I'll just let it auto. Next will be your SATA configuration, whereby you can set your SATA to be hot swap so that you can disconnect your SATA SSD or hard disk, right, from your system. But make sure you eject from Windows itself under the USB icon before you pull it out, and make sure that this is enabled. so that you can do the unplug straight. Then AMP configuration, these are all the power configuration, which I will use this power on by PCI-E. This is to wake up on LAN function, whereby if you are not at home and you want to remote access, there are some configuration. So I make use of this. I'll set it to enable so that I can just turn on my PC as and when I'm outside, not together with my PC. Onboard device configuration. Now, normally this is where you set your lanes itself. You can set to 8x8 or RAID lane or so. Then for HD audio, right, normally I don't use HD audio. I will just disable this to save power. Wi-Fi controller, I'll leave it on. Bluetooth, I'll leave it on. Then the rest over here, right, you can pause and take a look what you want to do. Now for LED lightings itself, right, this is not the ARGB. In fact, it's the postcode that is lit up on the motherboard itself. So if you find it irritating, you can just turn it off. Okay, next will be on this section here, the AMD overclocking, which I often use. This is whereby I use the Precision Boost Overdrive 2. And I can set to manual configuration. Okay, so these are the values that you type in and such to start your PBO2 settings. Then you can set your graphic card curve optimizer, or you can set your curve optimizer. This is often used by overclockers. So you can set as all call to negative and with a figure. Depending on your chipset itself, your processor chipset, the better chipset you have, right, the bin itself, right, you can go lower, as in like 30 or so. Then besides this, monitor wise, okay, this is whereby you see all the temperature monitor on your system itself. Make sure that it's monitored, then you will list over here. Then for speed, fan speed monitor, which is the RPM of your fans, case fans, your radiator fans. Right now I only have the radiator fans which is running at 977 RPM. Now, volt monitor is whereby it tells you that the system is taking how much voltage to the system. Q fan configuration, this is often used whereby you configure your fans. For example, I know that this first fan, right, the CPU fan profile, earlier on I showed you at 900 plus RPM. So let's say I were to set it to full speed, okay, and I were to go to the fan monitor, see, it will just pump up to max. So this is how you monitor the RPM. Now back to the Q fan configuration, just going to run as standard. So these are the configuration that you can do, and this is a separate unit whereby you can set your pump speed, but normally I'll set it to full speed. Reason being, right, if you do like PWM mode and to regulate depend on temperature itself, right, your pump might get damaged due to the irregular circulation on the motor itself. So normally I'll set to auto and set to full speed. And these are the chassis fan, whereby you configure all the chassis fan like fan 1, fan 2 and such. See? According to the fan speed that you wanted. And if you find this is troublesome, right, you can switch to the easy mode and go to your Q fan controller, make use of the mouse itself to do your temperature. You can do that, not an issue. Let me go back to the advanced mode, which is by pressing F7. Now, as mentioned, this is manual configuration on the stepping on your RPMs of your fans. If you find this troublesome, right, go to the easy mode where I show you by pressing F7. See, you can use this graph here to do your fan curves, not a problem. Okay, next will be the boot itself. Now, CSM, you must have this disabled. If you don't have this disabled, right, you can't trigger the resizable bar on your GPU itself. Discrete graphic card like the RTX 3060 all the way to 3090, or maybe your RTX 4090. Now, next is secure boot. some of you have played the game called Valerian, and you need to have this enabled, which is the secure boot mode. You have to set it to standard. If not, you can't load the game and play. Now, let's see. Oh, boot configuration. This is whereby you can configure your M.2. Let's say you have two M.2 with two different OS itself. You can set the priority as in like which to boot. Tools, these are meant for you to flash your BIOS. As you can see, I have none over here right now. So this is where you do the flashing of BIOS. Then roll back images. Secure erase, this is meant for you to erase your M.2. I wouldn't advise you to use this. Make sure to use the appropriate vendors application. Like Samsung, they have their own application. Make use of that to do the erase. Then for Amour crate, you can set this enable. When you boot up the new freshly installed Windows 11, right, it will prompt you to install this, and this is very much needed, in fact, to control the ARGBs, to control the fans in Windows mode, and some other features like the PVO2 and such. I mean the turbo boost on the processor and such. They have a very beautiful utility that you can check on. And coming to exit, as usual, I think this you are familiar with it. To load the optimized default, to save the changes that we've done, reset and such. The overall impression of this M-ATX motherboard to me is positive. First of all, the beefy VRM heatsink, whereby I run Cinebench on my 7950X processor for 3 times 30 minutes, and all the 30 minutes, right, it did sustain at 5 GHz, so not an issue. And when I touch the VRM itself, right, I can just place my finger there. It's feeling lukewarm, but it doesn't burn my fingers, so it's good. Next will be the RAMs itself. It can sustain at clock speed of 6000 MHz, which is good. Next I'd like to talk about is the M.2 Amour shield, which is this tool. Amazingly that they provide both on a M-ATX motherboard. And these screws over here, right, are captive thumb screws, whereby you don't lose them when you unscrew them. And the locking mechanism on the M.2, right, I like that feature whereby you don't need screws at all. You just place your M.2 and just secure it with the locking mechanism. Now, next will be the USB port. There are plenty to offer for me, which is total of 7 Type A and 1 Type C. So I don't find that I'm actually out of USB port. Next thing I like about this board is the fan layout, which you have total of 6 fan headers. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Reason being, right, if you were to place, let's say for example at the top with a radiator and the front with a daisy chain fan, so you have total like the pump to the AIO, the pump header for the AIO, then one for your radiator fans and one for the front fans, and they are of short distance when you connect them. So this makes cable management tidy. Same goes to the bottom, whereby you can just connect the bottom daisy chain fan, right, onto this fan headers over here. And for the rear, right, exceptional for the rear. In fact, I love it so much, whereby you don't have to route some of the motherboard layout, right. You have to route the cable of the rear fan all the way to the bottom, which I find is very silly. So having the PWM located over here, right, you can just connect the rear fan and to tuck them nicely and to connect on this PWM header. The only downside that I don't like about this board is all the fan headers are rated at 1 ampere. I wish that most of it, right, should be rated as 2 ampere or so. So that as a safety measure. But of course, based on self due diligence, if you know that you daisy 3 fans, right, and it's going to be like more than 1.5 ampere, you're going to melt the headers or to melt the connectors of your fans. So take note on this. Alright, there you have it. My overview about this board, my experience and my impression of this board. Hope you guys have enjoyed what I've shared with you. For those of you actually new to my channel, welcome to my channel. If you like my content, do remember to subscribe and to click on the notification bell button. Till then, take care, goodbye, see ya.